Yes, so we are live now. Um,
Right.
just a second. So I hope everybody is able to see us. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's talk session that is on Introduction to Patent Litigation. My name is Harshal Bhale. I'm a student convener of Center for Study and Research in Intellectual Property Rights, NUSRL Ranchi. This center was founded in response to an escalating need felt by scientists, lawyers, technologists, and companies. The object was, and still is, to gain a thoughtful knowledge in patent, trademark, design, copyright law. More in meticulous, the CSR IPR wishes to gain a better insight and glimpses into new and evolving areas of intellectual property rights. And the general problem for patents, trademarks, design, and copyright will be dealt by this center. To concertize on these particular objects, the Center for Study and Research in Law has been organizing manifold of activities on an interdisciplinary level. Organizing the conferences, these activities would include fundamental research, the gathering of the documentation, organizing conferences, and scientist service to this community. And today's talk is also on the same line. So now, without making any further ado this particular session, I would ask the chairperson of the Center for Study and Research in Intellectual Property Right, Dr. Murthy sir, to kindly share his insight and please introduce this particular topic. Murthy sir, please.
Right. Good morning, Mr. Vivek, and dear participants, good morning. I am Dr. Srinivasamurthy, Associate Professor, Chairperson of the Center in National University of Study and Research in Ranchi. I am glad to present to you all today's event that talk on Introduction to Patent Litigation. The court practitioner, Mr. Vivek Ranjan, Associate Partner from Singh and Singh Law Firm, Delhi. So he is very gracious to accept our request and provide his services to the students. So you will be beneficial out of his experiences for past period, and Mr. also be his future sites also will be sharing with you people to understand and digest this how the patent litigation in today's condition. That means the trends of patent litigation in today's condition. He will be giving the deep insight for your learning. So before going into the core content, I just to give the platform, the groundwork clarification that what on what basis this construction is going to happen. So that part I will just give you in 5 minutes time. I don't take much time. I'll try to crisp it as best as possible, and I will limit myself by this 5 to 7 minutes, and then he will carry on. So, in the brief condition of the patent platform, to say, like patent when started, where originated, if you think about where civilization started, their patent started. So patent is having a core connectivity with the civilization, means a part of quality living is having an attachment of patent development. That is the innovative factor, time and again, making improvement, whether ape to man or any of the things, if you look in all those perspectives, invention is there in the preliminary form. That means the primitive form is that, like stone based weapons developed, there onwards, invention grown, and invention grown to such an extent, reaching to moon and reaching to now sun or Mars today we are working with. So these all development, this is the long journey, and in this long journey I don't want to take the whole scenario because we have very limited time. I just want to give only the recent development of current condition, that is after trips. We will cut off from trips onward, that means 1994 is the deadline. So from 1994 after scenario, if you try to look in, even though 1994 TRIPS agreement came into existence and members of 80-90 members become, but thereafter India to become member had taken time. By 97 we become member to it. whatever reasons is no requirement right now, but somehow by 1997 we become member. What is the impact of this over our patent structure, patent legislative structure? That part only I want to take out from here. Even though 1911 act been replaced with 1970 act in patents, those things we don't need to go for. I'm just giving the new changes. The new modern trend is that 1999, in compliance of TRIPS, we made amendments. And for compliance of TRIPS, first time in 1999, then next to that 2002, then next to that 2005. So these three amendments made a substantial change, and DSB also certified that we are compliance of TRIPS and we are internationally having that quality. That means we are at international plane having the standard of patent protection proper, certified by due authority. So now going into the rules, that means how much the substantial portion is significant, that much the procedural part also significant. This is what we are learning from the law. So when procedural part is also significant, if you look into the procedural development, 1970 legislation do have 1972 rules. 1972 rules been amended, replaced in 2003 because of the modern changes. And 2003 rules came into existence, and thereafter very continuously we are vetting it and improving it to the required conditions by 2006, 2013, 2016, 2019, 2021. Also proposed amendments for educational institutions adding in and their patent protection procedures to be considered. So in that manner, this thing is also recently gazetted in 9th February 2021. Now it is the procedure going on for objections and clarifications or any other means no jo modifications suggested be submitted to the Government of India, Ministry, the Department of Heavy Industry. So if you submit, the interested people can just go through and just make out your proposals if you have anything to the government. So this is what under process. Once this be completed, then this will also be amended and bring into effect. So now when you look into that, these many changes, why I am mentioning, this is how in recent period, means past 20 years time, we had so many changes to make our legislative quality up to the international standards. And in that procedure, if you see, as per even WIPO 2020 report, in that procedure, you can find the factual figures. Very recently, this was September, I think this report been released. When you look into the patent filing, 1911, we had only 5 patents. If you see in 1911 Act, we had only 5 patents. Then if you see in 1970 after, we used to get 100 patents per annum. Today, what is the position of India? What is the count of patent applications we are receiving is somewhere around 50,000, 40,000, 50,000 applications we are receiving, of which means around 20,000 above, 20 to 30, 25,000 patents we are granting per annum. So how this jump happened? Only because of TRIPS compliance. After becoming member to TRIPS, we got applications from hundreds to thousands. If you look in international scenario, so I just give one glance of this structure, where the patent applications at international level, how many applications at international level? As per WIPO, it said that somewhere around 33 lakhs per annum internationally, all across 200 countries, or 180, 184. Now that also non-compliance countries went on, it is coming somewhere around 170 countries, or 150, 67, 70 there it is. So out of this 33 lakh applications, India is also having effective count. If you look in, even though 50,000 applications we are getting, other patent applications, significant applications, all are equally filing in Indian designating condition. So under that way, significance of patent application, patent working, that means technological working, any technology you take in, right from you take the conventional mechanical engineering to today's means no space, aerospace, and means no other information and communication technology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, n number of technological developments you can take up. They all are equally working, and we are on the top 10. And in filing also, if you see in the countries, as per 2020 report, we are on the 10th positions. We are at the last point of the double digit and entering into the single digit. That means on the top 10 we are now getting into. So our means no way is not much ahead. Only a matter of 9 figures to jump upon and stand as a world number one. So these indicators are clearly making our position to reach on the top of the world countries. And we already proven in one factor, COVID vaccine, along with other countries, on par with other countries, we also come out with the vaccine with all compliances transparently completed. That is also one of the indication where on technology nowhere we are inferior or lagging behind. So in that circumstance, I want to just add on few more changes. Like Delhi High Court to come out with a new development that High Court of Delhi rules governing patent suits 2020 is one other landmark development in the effective governance. That means justice administrative system improvement or uh, administrating procedures strengthened in a good manner. Before that, we can also think about Commercial Courts Act 2015. So these changes also improved the quality of litigation handling. And in that manner, no doubt when international platform at the international level, when the platform is opened for all the members of the trips, there will be a scope of litigants also entering into the country and try to twist the environment to their command. Under such circumstances, these line of improvement, the developments will automatically gives rise for handling those conditions. Now judiciary also is well equipped with this kind of tools development, like a high court rules now governing patent suit specific. There we got new techniques like a hot tubbing process. And next to that, the next procedure what you can in that three aspects. One is a hot tubbing process, another one is confidentiality clubs, and next to that even mediation conditions. So these all procedures automatically, I think these details will be deliberated by our guest. So he is day to day practicing these aspects. He will be well versed with this. He will be giving details of this information. So in that manner, if you see for past 2 decades, whether standard essential patent conditions are fair and reasonable and non-discriminatory terms and conditions for licensing and other agreements. So these all things also significant in today's working. Under that condition, whether you take in information and communication technology cases like from Ericsson to till Appo case recently being coming up, like there are many landmark cases in this past 15-20 years happened, that Ringo, Philips, King Tech, Micromax, Xiaomi, Xiaomi, Intex, Eyeball, Lava. So these are all list of cases. Now these are all world players who entered into this country, and they are also started their litigation once to other. So in that way, information communication technology itself this much. When you look into the other sectors like biotechnology, where starting from what is that Moico Monsanto BT cotton case, from there onwards you can see, then later to that Novartis case, after that EMR rights, and later to that patent protection. And even today the current developments, um, Bayer case after. So this way in pharma sector, any sector you take in, we are equally having the quality, the contention, the litigation growing, and by there it is coming out very significant, and the count of litigation also increasing gradually. Under this new platform, under this new scenario, how the patent litigation is struggling or growing, so will be kind of provided by our guest today. So let us keenly listen to him and try to understand. And one more thing also from the student point of view, see, normally students do have the difficulty that I am a last student. How I can think about technical aspects, whether science is part of my concern or not. For that also we have a right choice today. This Vivek Ranjan is having the science background plus law background. He did his BTech from NIT Jalandhar, and he did his LLB from IIT Kharagpur. So in that way, he is the right person to give this doubtful. This doubt also can be clarified. So I request all the participants to keenly follow his expressions and try to understand and gain knowledge. I hand over to Mr. Vivek Ranjan to take care of.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Murthy sir, for the insightful words. Now, I would like to invite the honor of the guest of the honor for today's session. That is Mr. Vivek Ranjan. He is. It is our pleasure to host currently the associate partner at Singh and Singh Law Firm, New Delhi, where he handles cases pertaining to IP litigation and licensing. Uh, Basically of the licensing issues like FRAND issues, pharmaceutical patent litigation, and pricing and law of competition, service matters, insolvency. Sir has previously been a part of patent prosecution teams at Lakshmi Kumaran and Sridharan and Perifexco Legal, and been a part of some trademark landmarks intellectual property litigation in the country. He has also presented numerous papers on the IPR subject, and he has recently been bestowed with the IP Rising Star Asia Pacific Award for the consecutively for the last 2 years by managing IP. We are thankful to you, sir, for taking out time from your busy schedule, addressing with us. Addressing with us his flair, IP aptitude, and helping us learn so much from him. So now I would like to invite Mr. Vivek sir to kindly uh, take over the floor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy, and thank you, Herschel, for your graceful words. And I'm really honored to join this conference and conversation and discussion with enthusiastic students and prestigious university like NUSRL Ranchi. So uh, I'm sure Dr. Murthy has set a platform to start that discussion, and he really discussed about what is happening in India, and those were very insightful, particularly the figures which he put before us from WIPO. And as a practitioner before the High Court and the different other courts, I actually can say this, So, in my experience, the patent practice has grown tremendously in India, and some of the courts are, they do deserve credit. One of them is, of course, Delhi High Court. Uh, Now, to the extent, I also see various global players coming to India to enforce their patent globally. So, out of the whole world, global players choose India to enforce their global portfolio of patent, and this is very encouraging. And I'm not talking about some small companies; these are big companies, multinationals, and they actually hold good grasp in the business. So, patent scenario in India has, yes, improved tremendously, particularly in this particular decade. Now, coming to the discussion today, I'm under impression that most of my audience today are students, and they also have questions on their career in patent litigation. Let me start with sharing my slide so that we are sticking to the point. The slide visible to everyone?
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay. Okay, so let me start. Let's start with the life cycle of patent and corresponding professional career in patent. So, the life cycle of patent is start with an innovation, you know, and when an inventor thinks of an idea and he actually possess that idea. When I say possession of idea, it means that he's actually able to work that idea. Just mere conception of idea is not enough. The inventor has to be in the possession of idea. So when he is in possession of idea, the next step is that he discloses this idea to his patent attorney. And of course, disclosure to attorney is under the confidentiality agreement or the non-disclosure agreement. After the disclosure to attorney, the drafting of the patent application comes, and this is very important step because if you go to any scientist, And if you'll ask him that what have you done in your invention, he will never give you exact point. I don't blame them. It's not their intention not to give you the exact intention. But they are by their nature, they are very theoretical and they would like to tell everything what they have done. And the specific invention which is there, it is the job of the patent attorney to get that particular point out of it. So, for example, let me give you an example. If some invention has occurred at a point of piston, say some inventor has come up with a rubber cap of a piston of an engine, and if you'll ask him that what have you invented, he will tell you that I have invented a new engine. Okay. However, his invention lies in that particular rubber cap which he has invented, having high durability or having, high surface tension or something to that effect, or elasticity or less elasticity. But you would say, I have developed a new engine. To really get the invention out of him is a huge task in itself. And it comes only after drafting of the patent application. Because when a patent application is drafted, it elaborates the invention and also specifically claims that what invention is there. So that is very important stage. After that, patent application is filed. The contentious stage come wherein examiner examine your patent application. He puts his objection if he feels that this was already in the state of the art, or any person who feels that something I'm trying to capture, which was already a free knowledge, he can put those objections before the patent office. And then after, if the contentious stage has passed and the patent applicant is successful, the patent application is granted. And obviously, after the grant of the patent, you want to commercialize it, you want to get into business, so you license it or you sell it. It is completely a business strategy. And finally, a patent enforcement. So, while giving brief of this whole situations, what I'm trying to tell you is that what is the role of what professional in during this whole patent life cycle. So if you'll see the innovation and disclosure and drafting of the patent application, this is a stage where invention is conceptualized or your patent application is conceptualized. So the role of a drafter comes into play. Usually, most of the time, these patent drafters are patent attorney who are chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, electronics engineers, IT engineers, computer science engineers, etc. So I would say that I mean, for the 90 to 100% of the time, it is entirely a technical arena with a pinch of legal angle so that the legal compliance is accordingly done. See, what the patent application is drafted, ultimately, that application will form the basis of all the subsequent prosecution of the patent before the patent office. When I say prosecution, as a post filing stage to the pre grant stage, and also the enforcement and litigation if at all it happens. So drafting of patent application is very important stage wherein apart from complying with all the legal requirements which an lawyer would look, the technical person also has to get involved in a major fashion. So this is the patent conceptualization stage. The next stage is the patent prosecution stage, wherein the role of legal attorneys and the patent attorney. When I say patent attorney, I mean patent agent under Section 126 of the Patent Act. These patent agents are engineers or graduate in science people. They both have a role to play. You can say 50-50%. And then it becomes the stage of patent litigation. Again, this is a stage wherein both patent attorney and the lawyer has to play role. Now, the point is then, if it is so technically oriented domain, would a lawyer survive in this, having no science or technology background? The answer to this is a big yes. I mean, it's a huge misconception floating around that a lawyer cannot survive patent litigation. I personally know many people in the patent litigation and different stage of practice, conceptualization, prosecution, and litigation stage, who are pure lawyer and they are doing very good in patent litigation. So when you choose to practice in patent domain, you have to be ensured that you have a good team, you know. So it is very close knit team of technical people and lawyers who assist each other. So when you go to any other civil practice, there is this saying that you master the facts and you will master the law. So you have to master the facts, and facts in a patent litigation, apart from several other things, is also the technical aspect of the invention. That is also a fact which you study in the Evidence Act. Relevant fact. Relevant fact for patent practice is your invention. What is the invention? Where it lies? What is the technology involved? You know, so all these factors come into picture. Having said that, as I said, it is a close knit practice of the technocrats and lawyers, and both have to contribute and both have to understand. The engineer will have to understand the legal aspect, and the lawyer will also have to understand the technical aspect. When I say technical aspect, it does not mean that you have to be as smart as an inventor. You have to solve complex differential equations. You have to figure out where which vector is lying where. No, you just have to understand the concept of invention. You just have to analyze the claims of the patent legally, you know, and you just have to understand that how what is the test of the infringement, and legally if the infringement is happening or not, or if legally your invention is actually has the novelty or inventive step or industrial application. So both the group has their own role. I'll go to the next slide. Patent rights based on the subject matter. So the question is, since we are discussing patent litigation, the question is why to make so much fuss about it? What is patent? Why people are fighting over it? As you must all be aware, the patent is a monopolistic like over the knowledge, and you claim that that knowledge is something which you have come up with, and it has some inventive aspect which was never there, or a person who is a daily worker in that particular domain, who is going to the office 9 to 5 doing that particular job in that particular technology domain, would not have thought about that invention during his daily work. You have to prove this before the patent office. If somebody has come up with an patent application which tries to capture the free knowledge which is existing, then it's a huge issue, because out of that free knowledge many people have taken further steps. They have vested rights, and equity will protect them, as you would know in law. So it is very important that something which was already free is not monopolized. Okay, and something which is new, the company have invested billions and zillions of dollars in coming up with that invention. Even if it is an individual patent, an invention comes with a lot of sacrifices and investment at the individual level itself. And obviously it is a business income, and everybody would like to protect that particular zone so that they can earn money and so that their investment can be realized. Some of the major companies, for example, I always give example of Microsoft. People think that Microsoft is selling Surface books and Microsoft is selling Windows and everything. Today, as Microsoft stands today, the revenue of Microsoft from the intellectual property licensing is a lot more than the revenue they generate from the hardware selling of the hardwares. So now, I mean, 60 to 70% revenue of Microsoft is through the intellectual property licensing, copyrights, patents, and everything. Nokia, another example is Nokia. It has huge set of portfolio for standard essential patents and their licensing. So now, I mean, you have to decide whether you would call a hardware-based industry or a patent licensing industry. In my view, they are completely patent licensing industry, and their bread and butter is patent and other intellectual property rights. So, if we look at the Patent Act, the Patent Act has clearly distinguished between two type of patent. One is the product patent, and another is process patent. There is a third category which Patent Act doesn't mention, which is called the product by process dispute. I'll come to that later. But if you look at some of the sections of the Patents Act, for example, if you look at Section 21J, it clearly clearly distinguishes between product patent and process patent. Similarly, 210 we would tell you about the patented article and patented process. So these two distinction has been made by the Patent Act, which is clearly visible. It is also kind of inherent distinction of the patent to the extent that whatever the technology domain is, I'll come to that in the next slide. Uh, whether it is a pharmaceutical patent, whether it is a standard essential patent, whether it is a biomedical patent, or it is a computer related patents, there always be a distinction of product and process in that patent. So this is not artificially created distinction, but it is something which is very inherent in the patent jurisdiction. When the section 48 is, if you read section 48 of the Patents Act, you would clearly see that rights of the patentee in a product and rights of the patentee in a process clearly distinguished. Burden of proof, again 104, that also lies the burden of proof in case of the infringement of a process patent. So basically that's in civil litigation the rule is that whosoever has brought the suit, he will have to prove the claim by the evidence. However, in case of process patent, the rule is slightly modified. I would say it is not modified, but another step has been added under the Patents Act, and we'll discuss it at the later point of the time. Am I audible to everyone? And if someone has some question, they can forward to me.
Yes, sir. You're perfectly audible.
Okay. So now let's come to the patent litigation, which is domain wise. When I say domain wise, I mean the technology domain. What domain? Um, since I practice mostly before the Delhi High Court, as far as patent jurisdiction is concerned, I can tell you the basis of my this slide is the practice before Delhi High Court. So pharmaceutical patents, it has always been the contentious issues right from the 2000 start of 2000. And as Mr. Dr. Murthy told, there were several amendments in 2002, 1998, 2002, and 2005, and various amendments were made by Indian government. Before that, the product patent was not into picture, but to the lobbying of people at the TRIPS level, the product patent was subsequently added in Indian Patents Act. And if you look at the Patents Act, you will feel that this Patent Act has been hurriedly drafted, and that the reason behind is the 2005 pressure for India, because sanctions were almost issued to Indian government for not complying with the Patents Act, and in hurried fashion, 2005 several amendments were made in Patents Act. Many there are many loose ends in the Patent Act. Some of the definition which are in the definition section of the Patents Act are not subsequently followed in the act anywhere. So if you read Patents Act carefully, you will know it will speak for itself that there is a what is its history. So pharmaceutical patent, when this kind of civil suit comes before the High Court, there apart from the issue of the infringement and issues which are uh, which are in Patents Act, you would also see issues related to Drugs and Cosmetics Act and patent linkage and Section 3 of the Patent Acts and public interest issue. So I don't know if you know Section 3 of the Patents Act. We discussed about Section 21J of the Patent Acts, which defines an invention. Okay. Section 3 of the Patents Act define what are not invention. So Section 3 of the Patents Act carve out a niche wherein even if the Section 21J is applicable, still it would not be called as an invention. So this carving exception is due to various reasons. For example, it tries to protect something which is the natural phenomenon. Let me give an example. For example, electromagnetism. Or let me give you a simpler example. Let's take an example of gravity. Gravity is a natural phenomenon. Newton law says any two body will attract to each other. Okay, there will always be a gravitational force between two bodies. natural phenomena. Now, no one can patent this natural concept or this natural phenomena. If somebody would try to patent a natural phenomena, anything which is governed by this law will get monopolized. So, for example, when you're walking on the floor, the gravity has a role to play, right? Your ear has a role to play in balancing your body. You would, if you studied biology, you would know this. So your ear can actually assess the gravitational force and it can accordingly balance your body. All this is happening because gravity is a natural phenomena and your body is exploiting that natural phenomena to come up with the result. So if somebody would try to patent gravity, it cannot be allowed. Okay. However, if this natural phenomena is intervened by a human to come out with something which is very technical in nature and which has an output and industrial applicability, that will be patentable. Let me give an example. For example, you're exploiting the gravity to let water fall over the turbine, and you are rotating the turbine, which is again exploiting another natural phenomena of electromagnetism to generate electricity. No, the human intervention of putting turbine between two natural concepts of gravity and electromagnetism is giving you something which is industrially applicable, that is the electricity. So this intervention is patentable. I'm I mean I'm just assuming that it has happened for the first time. Of course, the turbine is an old concept that is not patentable now for the reason of being it is not novel now. But let's assume it. If something for the first time has come up with turbine and it's exploited, uh, gravity and electromagnetism, this human intervention itself is a patentable. Similarly, another example is microorganisms or seed or the living organisms as such are not patentable. Computer programs per se are not patentable. The reason being that computer programs per se are covered under the Copyright Act. It is a literary work and covered under the Copyright Act, and they don't want to. Parliament would not like to protect give a dual protection to a subject matter. But then you have to remember that computer program per se is not applicable, right? So when we study copyright, then I'm not sure if you have studied idea expression dichotomy. So in a literary work, particularly literary work like computer program, this idea expression dichotomy occurs, wherein the part of it is idea and the another part of it is expression. The code that people write on computer, it is just the expression of that idea. You know, you really instruct your computer through those codes to do something which is highly technical. You know, uh, for example, SSD. You know, SSD is backed by a computer code and it instructs the hardware of your computer to act in certain way. So basically, computer codes are boss's order, and execution of it is done by the hardware. The boss's order is the expression, and the execution of it in the computer is something which is patentable. The act itself is patentable. The idea is patentable. But how you're achieving it through the expression, that is not patentable. So, Section 3 issues are always there, and both in pharmaceutical patents, particularly Section 3D. And I mean, it's a huge discussion altogether, and we don't have really time today to get in so much detail. So, I'm just giving you an overview. And if you have questions, just let me know in the meanwhile, okay? The third is the standard essential patents. Now, again, it is very important field and new field. And as I told you, all the global players they are looking forward to India and they are coming to India to enforce their global portfolio. India has proven to be a very good jurisdiction as far as standardization and very progressive jurisdiction also, I must say, for the standard essential patent. Let me just briefly tell you what standard essential patents are. Okay, so another example I'll have to give you. Um, let's assume that you use You want to use a pen drive. Okay, so your pen drive has a socket which has a particular configuration. Now, assume a situation where every company is making their own pen drive with different configuration of the slot. One is say one has a spikes, one has the groove as it is there in your regular pen drives. Somebody is making some other kind of pen drive. So when the socket of the pen drive is not standardized, there will be chaos, because if I'm going to buy a pen drive, I'm not sure whether that pen drive is going to fit in on my computer or not, because it is not standardized. And similarly, I will have to buy a particular pen drive based on what socket is there in my computer. Okay, so every pen drive will have to be manufactured according to a non-standardized uh, socket insert, which is there in particular laptop. It will be completely a chaos. Similarly, goes for your mobile charger, and it is the issue we faced on the daily basis. You go to your friend's house and you ask for a phone charger, and that configuration may be different from your own charger. You know, the I mean that is actually in today's scenario the issue. That is not much of an issue, because even the charger is standardized in 2, 3, 4 configuration, and we would know that there has to be one particular charger for the 4 configuration, and we get only 4 types of chargers in the market. But assume that every company is making their own configuration. Okay, then it will be a chaos. So therefore, what happens, that standard is set that if you're using a USB drive, every company will have to follow this standard, so that users are not at stress to hold that pen drive and look for the laptop, or take the laptop and then look, are running pillar to post in the market for the pen drive. So everything has to be standardized, and to standardize a technology, the standard setting organization asks for the best technology that is available in market, and they choose out of that technology that what all can be standardized for a particular purpose. So uh, now, before standardizing that technology, they always take a promise from the technology holder or the patent holders, that since I'm standardizing your standard technology will have wide application all over the world, and everybody will run after you to get the license of the patent, because it is the standard technology and everybody would like to have a standard technology in their laptop. So due to this particular scenario, you have to act in a very reasonable way and a non-discriminatory way. You should not be unreasonable to people. You should not say, okay, now my technology is standardized, now I can take whatever rate I want. So this behavior is called FRAND behavior. This is fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. You can see on the screen FRAND, FRAND behavior. So these type of patent has a different, completely different jurisdiction and sorry, jurisprudence, and it is very interesting. I also suggest NUSRL Ranchi, if they can open a subgroup in their intellectual property research center on the standardization patents, and if they do research on it, it's a huge topic. It's a topic in itself, apart from the regular patent law. So these kind of there are a lot of issues in SCPs: essentiality, portfolio licensing, royalty-based issues. I mean, there is so much to discuss. I'm just I've given you an overview, and I'll move forward. Otherwise, it is a huge topic. Otherwise, by the way, Dr. Murthy was mentioning about Oppo cases, Ericsson cases. All those cases we have done. The firm, I was involved in all those cases, and all those cases are related to SCP matters. So Oppo, Vivo, Ericsson cases, even recently Philips cases have been filed. All those cases are SCP cases. Genetic engineering, biotechnology patents. So the technology here is genetic engineer. You make some variation in the chromosome of the microorganism, and again, these kind of patents also face Section 3 issues. uh, and other ancillary issues. For example, in the recent case of Monsanto, the seed was involved, and the various notification of comment and maximum price fixation of seed they came into picture. And accordingly, the plaintiff and defendant they put on their arguments and defense uh, in this regard before the court, which is finally adjudicated. Yes, so last few points are about the product and process patent dispute. And as I've told you, the product and process patent is clearly distinguished in the Patent Act, and a lot of the strategy in the patent litigation is also dependent upon the fact whether the patent is a product patent and process patent. In each of the domains that I discussed above, they inherently have the distinction of product and process in their particular patent specification. So each claim, depending upon whether it is a product claim or it is a process claim, it has to be strategized in the civil litigation accordingly. I have listed down the stages of patent contentious issues where the parties are at contentions and arguments. It can also be called a part of the patent litigation. When a patent application is filed, the first you have to overcome the objection of examiner, then pre-grant opposition. It is a procedure under 25(1) of the Patents Act, wherein any person in the world can object to your application. This is called pre-grant opposition. Post-grant opposition is after the grant of the patent till from the grant of the patent to the expiry of 1 year. You can also file post-grant opposition before the opposition board, which is constituted by the controller. And this is revocation proceedings, which is before the IPAB. It is also before the High Court. So, as a matter of right, when a patent infringement suit is filed, you can also file counter claim challenging the validity of the patent before the High Court. Compulsory licensing issues are it is involuntary kind of licenses issued by the government and the controller when certain conditions are satisfied, including the conditions like the drug is not available in the market, or people are suffering, or it is not affordable. Section 84 of the Patents Act. I'm just stating all the sections. I mean, I hope audience are noting all the sections. It will be helpful for their understanding of the patent. So compulsory licensing issue also arises, and I had honor to work on the first compulsory licensing matter after certain stage, right, when it was before the Bombay High Court and Supreme Court. So these are also some of the issues that arises which a patent litigator can deal with. I have just tabulated this table wherein I have specifically stated that what are the grounds on which patent application can be challenged and at what stage these challenges are available. So pre-grant, post-grant, and revocation. And normally the question arises is when the revocation proceeding is already there, what is the need of the post-grant opposition 25(1)? So as I told you earlier, the Patents Act was hurriedly drafted, and some of the proceedings was probably hurriedly taken. And therefore, the Patent Act doesn't make distinction between post-grant opposition and revocation proceedings. Both are the post-grant proceedings against the patent applicant. But how to distinguish that? Supreme Court in an ERCON judgment, they tried to distinguish that, and they have actually created a distinction, and they said that the post-grant opposition is part of the patent prosecution, and from the grant till the expiry of the duration of the post grant, the patent would still be in the prosecution stage to the effect that it will not be, as they say, crystallized. Only after the expiry of the post grant opposition duration, a patent is said to have been crystallized according to the Supreme Court. As I said earlier, this is just the distinction made by the Supreme Court. Patent Act nowhere really come into the crystallization part of the patent. It clearly states that once a patent is granted, that means patent is granted. But Supreme Court had to make this distinction of post-grant opposition and revocation, and they went back to this effect. Now let's come to patent infringement suit. Patent infringement suit is like any other civil suit. It can be entertained by any court of the original civil jurisdiction. Principally, in most of the cases, it is district court. However, some advocates are fortunate, and they also have this civil jurisdiction in high courts. For example, Delhi High Court, Calcutta High Court, and Madras High Court also has original civil jurisdiction. Earlier, some of the older high courts of India, for example, Patna High Court and Allahabad High Court, they also used to have the original civil jurisdiction. However, subsequently it was revoked. So there are a few high courts which enjoy original civil jurisdiction. The Commercial Courts Act, as Dr. Murthy also discussed, it is an act in furtherance of the interest of not just the patent litigators but also other commercial litigators, and it's a huge step in expediting the patent litigation. And let me tell you, give you an example, the OPPO case that Mr. Murthy discussed, uh, Dolby versus GTN Enterprises. That is the actual name of the case. That was filed in 2016, and by the end of 2019, or yeah, early 2020, it was uh, reached the final argument stage. The sister case, of course, it was Dolby versus Vivo. Uh, that reached final argument stage, and in by early 2020, we were almost at the stage of getting the final decision. So, 3 years for a matter to get a stage, right from the filing to getting through all the interim relief part and then getting into trial, cross examination, and final arguments, and seeing an end. It is some of this credit also goes to the steps taken by government, like the commercial law. The patent dispute is categorized as a commercial dispute. And again, Dr. Murthy told about this, that Delhi High Court was in process of making patent rules, and as we call in local parlance, the patent courts or the patent benches before the Delhi High Court. This is still under the consideration. The confidentiality club and hot tub, these has been officially added in the Delhi High Court rules under Chapter 7. And again, confidentiality club, uh, this is also called external eyes, and hot tub is also a procedure wherein you really don't sit into the uh, trial, but you call the experts before the court and you say, let the two expert argue. Let the expert from each side argue the case, and judge will listen and accordingly will decide. This is called hot tubbing. Confidentiality club is something to secure the confidential information of the parties. So basically, confidentiality club allows the holder of the confidential information a right wherein their confidential information cannot be accessed by the opposite side. However, it can be accessed by the experts of the opposite side, because the confidential information holder is under obligation by a third party not to reveal those confidential information. Let me give you an example. For example, I am under obligation with Mr. A not to disclose this information, and I have sued Mr. B saying that you're not behaving in a friendly manner, and you should be taking my license, because a similarly placed party, Mr. A, has taken your license. Mr. B would immediately demand that show me the license that Mr. A has taken. However, I will not be able to show Mr. B the license of Mr. A because I am bound by the confidential obligation of Mr. A. This is confidentiality club is actually a process by which you are able to balance the equities, and both sides are at a compromise, you can say, but it is certainly not inequitable. It is certainly not inequitable. It completely balance the equity of both the sides, and take care of rights of the both the side. If you'll notice, in the patent litigation manner, anyway, all the technical aspects or all the economical aspects are given by the experts and not the parties themselves, or the court is assisted by the expert. And expert to form an opinion, Confidentiality clause allows the expert to look at the confidential information, but does not allow the party who has appointed the expert to look at the information. Just to save the confidential obligation of the party. So this is a huge topic to discuss. A Supreme Court matter is also pending. 3 days back, I attended that matter wherein the confidentiality club, a recent order of Delhi High Court has been challenged by one of the parties, and we'll see what happened in that particular matter. So pre-institution and mediation and settlement of commercial matter. This is the step taken by the Commercial Court Act, wherein it states that if you don't have an urgent relief in a suit, then you must have to go to the pre-institution mediation and try to settle the commercial matter. It is again a step to resolve the dispute as soon as possible. Honestly speaking, I have not seen many matters getting settled under the pre-institution mediation, but some companies are trying to explore this particular avenue of Commercial Courts Act. And as of now, I really don't have a case to cite you wherein this was successful. But let's see. We are hopeful that it happens. Marshall, how much time do we have now?
So we have 15 minutes. We can extend for 15 minutes.
Okay. So let's come to civil litigation, which is the civil litigation is always started by a plaint, and when you present a plaint before the court, it is a very typical CPC concept. You present a plaint before court, like any other civil litigation, wherein you list down the cause of action, your damages, your relief. So just remember one thing that civil litigation must have the four ingredients. First, it must have party, it must have a cause of action, it must have a subject matter, and it must have a relief. These four are the essential ingredient of a civil suit. So in patent infringement cases also, all these ingredients are satisfied. There are parties. One is plaintiff, another is infringer or the alleged infringer. Subject matter is the patent. The cause of action is the instance where that subject matter was infringed. That is, the patent was infringed by selling, by offering for sale, something to that effect. And the relief is the damages and permanent injunction. All these are relief sought by the party. So a patent infringement suit is typically a civil suit filed before any court of original civil jurisdiction. Sometimes also the contumace actions are filed. Actions are a very typical kind of one kind of a civil suit, that is in which the suit is filed not because of an existing cause of action, but it is filed due to something that might happen in future. The only condition is that that happening in future has to be very imminent. So the party has uh, not experienced the cause of action as of yet, but there is imminent danger of the infringement. So this typically happens when for example, in pharmaceutical cases, contumace actions are a lot. Whenever a generic company files for the approval of a drug before the drug controller, based on that, the innovators comes before the court and say that since they have filed an application to manufacture that patented drug, it is imminent that they might launch it in the market, and it would cause irreparable loss to me. And so, mm, please issue a permanent injunction even before the cause of action has actually happened. Bristol Myers versus VC Butada judgment of Delhi High Court, they have ruled on this aspect, and they have held it to be valid action. Again, the written statement, when a plaint is filed in defense, the written statement is filed typically 30 days is allowed from the service of summons. It is extendable to 120 days by the court. However, again, under the commercial code, it is very strict deadline. So when you'll see under the unamended CPC, the deadline, even after, though the time was less, 90 days was only given, But even then, the court used to extend the time to file written statement on the equitable basis or on the justice basis. But in the Commercial Courts Act, the intention is not to delay the commercial matters, and therefore this timeline has been made very strict, which is also very strictly taken by the commercial court benches. Application to written statement is filed only when leave is granted by the court. So that is also there. Counterclaim can be filed. So when a patent infringement suit is filed, the defendant can file a counterclaim saying that I challenge the validity of your patent. So the patentee says that you are infringing my patent. They say that I'm not infringing your patent for these reasons. Apart from the written statement, I'm also filing a counterclaim wherein I'm challenging the validity of your patent. So again, in the CPC, the counterclaim has the same status as of a plaint. If you read, I think Order 8, Rule 6 or 6A, something like that, they have given the counterclaim the same status as of a plaint, and accordingly, the written statement to the counterclaim and replication follows. Now, pleadings is always verified by the person who is executing it, and it looks very trivial. When I was a student and I used to go to the internship and I used to look at the pleadings, I used to file, why you're signing this verification? What is the importance of it? Let me tell you, this is very fundamental, the verification of pleading, and now I understand the importance of it. You can extend cross examination to 2 days just on the fact that verification is not proper or the witness is lying on the verification. So I remember a case wherein one witness, he was kind of nervous, and he was asked the question that who signed this verification, and he replied, I did not sign it. Then he was asked, are you sure you did not sign it? He said, I did not sign it. And then we immediately closed the cross examination. Because, if you have not signed the verification, or if you say that the basis of what you have written in the pleadings is a hearsay, or you've been told about this. Another case, a patent infringement suit was filed by the patentee, and I was for the defendant. And in the cause of action, it was written that I was told by somebody that the defendant is going to launch a patented drug, and we take this statement to the highest level to say that this suit is completely a hearsay. It is based on an action which is told by somebody to someone without any basis. I mean, the cause of action itself is a hearsay, and even in the verification part also it was verified that way. So verification is very fundamental in patent litigation. Another case, the witness was in front of me, and then my senior, he asked the question, uh, have you verified the affidavit? He said, yes, I have verified. And you have also notarized it? He said, yes, I have also notarized it. It was notarized in front of me. Then we asked the question, okay, tell me, what was the gender of the notary? And he said, male. And in the notary, she was a female. In the seal, the name was of female. So we immediately, these points, these are actually tricks and tactics of cross examination, which are very helpful. And uh, though it seems very trivial to students or interns or very early associate in their career, but if they are under a proper guidance, you would know that these can make or break a deal. All these small little things. As I said, pleadings form the basis of the trial. Anything which is beyond pleadings are not allowed by the court. You can actually take an objection before the court that uh, in the trial, what is coming, the new facts are coming. It was never pleaded before in the plaint, or it was never pleaded before in the written statement, and court will struck off that defense, or that particular pleading in the replication, that okay, this is something which is completely new, and now that pleadings are complete, you cannot really go beyond the pleadings. When civil suits are filed, interim reliefs are part and parcel of that uh, civil suit. In fact, in patent litigation, let me tell you that people fight for interim reliefs only. They fight for interim reliefs only, and uh, uh, the several decisions of even Supreme Court has taken objections sometime that in at the interim stage, such big judgments are not really called for. It amounts to almost a mini trial. So interim relief is a huge thing in civil litigation, particularly for commercial litigation. So 3912 temporary injunction is one of the interim relief. Uh, we know all the three factors of the temporary injunction, that is prima facie case, balance of convenience, and irreparable injury. However, in patent litigation, the fourth factor comes into picture. It's called public interest factor. It was decided in an American Cyanamide case, and accordingly, it is called American Cyanamide principles. So, particularly for cases like standard essential patents and for the cases like pharmaceutical patents, sometimes people take this defense that the temporary injunction should not be granted because it would affect the public. Rod-Cipla is a very important judgment in this regard. You can read Rod-Cipla division bench judgment. So Rod-Cipla, there are two judgments. One judgment is at the interim stage. Another judgment is by Justice Nandaraj Jog at the final decision. So if you want to read about this public interest factor and the fourth factor, which is prevalent in patent litigation, read the interim stage judgment. I think that judgment is by Justice Ravindra Bhatt. The single judge is by Justice Ravindra Bhatt. The division bench is by Justice Mukherjee. Appointment of local commissioner is another interim relief that we ask for to get the uh, product seized and put it on the super dari and to get the accounts book, to get the hard disk, etc. Appointment of confidentiality club, hot tubbing, all these are interim reliefs that we want. Although the appointment of confidentiality club or hot tubbing has the consequences at the trial stage and even at the final hearing stage, but most of the time it is filed at the application itself is filed at the interim stage. Interrogatories and discovery. This is the another method wherein the parties can contradict or get some of the fact admitted by the other side. The Commercial Court Act has completely substituted the interrogatory order 11 of the CPC for the commercial matters, and the principle basically in interrogatory is that you cannot ask something which is the exclusive evidence of the adversary. This is the basic principle behind interrogatories. Uh, you have to let the other side have his liberty to produce something which is which is his exclusive evidence. So at the trial stage, you might argue that okay, the adverse interpretation should be taken or adverse presumption should be taken because he has not produced the particular evidence. But you cannot force him to produce a particular evidence by way of interrogatory. These are the subsequent stages of the suit: completion of pleadings, then framing of issues. When I was a student, I used to get frequent questions during moot courts. Tell me who frames the issues, and I used to say the parties frame issue, which is wrong. Party only proposed to the court that certain issues framed. It is the court finally, based on the hearing, substantive hearing, court decides the what issues has to be framed. Then is the admission denial of documents. Then witness statements are filed. Then examination in chief happens. Cross examination happens. Re-examination happens by the leave of the court only. And then final arguments happen, and then decision. So these are the subsequent stages. Each of this stage is very elaborative, and we are actually running short of time. Otherwise, I would have loved to go into all of these stages, uh, but I am just skipping it for now, and I'm also skipping rest of the presentation for the some other day maybe. Uh, we are running short of the time. I would invite questions if somebody has on this presentation, and I will be happy to answer it.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really, really good. I mean, presentation on patent to introduction to patent litigation. Uh, so there was this question which was actually asked in register as well as their Satwik Kanhani. This is the question that usually I could find in the in the registration form. That is, they are saying ki how do we intern for the same if currently in the second or third year. So they are basically asking for internship. How do we
Sorry,
get the
I
internship
missed your
regarding this?
question.
And so Satwik Kanhani,
Are
who is a
they
second year
NUSRL
student,
student?
no sir, no. He was one
Okay.
who
So
done the
the
registration for the same. Yes.
see actually in at Sing and Sing the internship is completely on the merit basis. So or also we also take into consideration the recommendation of professors or something like that. Or if it is pure merit, then we even don't need the recommendation of professors. So there are a lot of applications that come. I will be happy to help the interns as far as I can go and help them. So that is not a problem. Send an application to Sing and Sing or to my email address.
Right, right. Sir, also there was this question which was asked by Vaibhav Sharma. He's asking, sir, can you please
Hmm.
explain patent with respect to right to privacy?
With respect to
Right to privacy. With respect
patent,
to
with
right
respect
to
to right to
privacy, sir.
privacy, is it talking
Yes,
about the
sir.
confidentiality club? Okay. So as I
Yeah.
told you, confidentiality club is something which is a huge topic. I have explained already confidentiality club. It balances the equities of parties. They also okay. This is the question. Yeah. So basically, it allows a party to disclose the confidential information within a club, wherein the other side himself is not a party. Because if other side himself is a party in the confidentiality club and he's able to access all the confidential information, the rights of a third party will be defeated, who is competitor to the defendant. You know, so confidentiality club is a very new concept and it actually very balancing and very good concept wherein you are also complying with the natural justice. You know you're also complying with the confidentiality obligations of the plaintiff, and everybody can remain happy about it, even the judges. you know there are contentions to the effect that the confidentiality defeats the natural justice, but I don't think so. I'm completely against this opinion, because anyway, in civil litigation, as far as technical and economical matters and confidential matters are dealt with, all those matters are dealt with the expert, and the other side completely relies on the advice of the expert and the attorney. So if you can't trust your attorney, I mean, whom else to trust? Attorneys are part of the confidentiality. Only requirement is the defendant cannot be part of it, because otherwise the confidentiality obligation of the confidential information holder will be defeated. So this is the confidentiality.
Right. Sir, as we are running quite short in time, so we will take two more questions and then we will conclude this particular session. So now this question is from Saranya Das. She's saying, can you please discuss about what commercial clauses we can take care of while drafting any patent technology transfer agreements?
Okay. So patent technology transfer agreement first. Again, let me start with these kind of agreements are very confidential agreement. So while you're drafting the agreement, you have to be very careful about the limit of technology transfer that you want. You also have to be very careful about the rights that subsequently arise after the transfer of technology. So there are also issues related with the grant back clauses, which is not allowed under the Patents Act. If you read, grant back clauses are not allowed. So you cannot actually assert that if you subsequently develop some technology out of this technology transfer, you have to grant back me the exclusive rights of those. No, this is not allowed. This single clause can void your whole technology transfer. So these are the little small things that it actually depends on the facts and circumstances and also the surrounding parties that it exactly has to be the patent transfer law. But you have to be really careful about the limit of the transfer, grant back clauses, if it is amounting to license, sale, and if it amounts to sale, would it also amount to the patent exhaustion? How much are you transferring the rights? Would you be able to control those technology after the transfer of rights? These are the issues, some of the issues that I have listed for the patent transfer.
And so the last question that we'll take, and then we'll wind up the session. The last question is from Kranta Barse. He's asking, sir, if a patent of a firm contains certain portion of trade secrets, can the firm go ahead and file a patent without mentioning the trade secret?
No. Patent right is a quid pro quo right. You're disclosing your technology to the society, and in lieu of that, government has agreed to protect you. Even it is one of the grounds in the revocation and post grant and pre grant, all the three proceedings, that if you have not sufficiently disclosed the matter, your patent will be revoked. You cannot cheat with the government or the society. Okay, patent is a quid. First thing, patent is a quid pro. You have to be very transparent. You have to tell everything about your technology, and government will agree to protect you through the patent.
Right, right, right. So
So, and for
now,
example, Maggie and Coca Cola, they have decided to keep their trade secrets alive forever. But then they have put accordingly the resources and they invest in protecting that trade secret. Okay, but you can choose to have a trade secret and you do not disclose it to the society. That is your call and your business is trying. But if you decide for patent, then you have to disclose
right, right. So in continuation of the same, there is this another question that is asked by the same person. Is asking and continue, will the patent without a trade secret portion be protected under the Patent Act 1970 with the same force as it would be if the same patent was filed inclusive of the trade secret?
it. I think I have answered this question. If trade secret is the invention, then you have to disclose it.
Right,
Okay. However, having said that, if if you don't want to disclose the trade secret part of it, but what is left is also an invention in itself. If it satisfies, suppose A plus B constitute your subject matter, wherein A is the trade secret that you don't want to disclose. However, B you want to get it protected by the patent. But then you have to ensure that the B that you're trying to protect, that is sufficient for a patent application and for the grant of the patent. It has to satisfy the definition of invention, inventive step, industrial applicability, novelty, everything. So that can be done, but this condition.
right, right, right. So now I guess there are a few questions, but it won't be feasible for us to take this because since we have already extended our timeline. Now,
That's right.
thank you so much, sir, Vivek, sir. Thank you so much, Murthy, sir. And it would not have been possible if it wasn't for Murthy, sir, because he was the one who was guiding us all through. And I would like to thank Vivek, sir, for coming up here and giving this fruitful information to everyone who have joined. Now, for the vote of thanks, I would like to invite Shaurashni Chakravarti. She is a co-convener of Center for Study and Research in Intellectual Property Right, and she will be concluding this session with the thank you note. So, Rashni,
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you
yes,
are.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank Vivek sir for taking out some time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with this beautiful session. And a patent has become extremely important, especially in this modern scenario where technology transfer and constant innovation is the need of the hour. Sir, in his deliberation, has chalked out the importance of FRAND licensing and confidentiality clubs and the importance of external eyes on the agreements with respect to patent disputes. Sir has also chalked out the patent infringement dynamics, pertaining to the pharmaceutical sector. Lastly, I believe that the session was extremely fruitful for getting to know about the technical aspects of patent litigation, an aspect which is almost always overlooked in the academic discourse, what we learn in college. Thank you so much, sir. We cannot thank you enough for this session, and CSR IPR Nusrat Ranchi looks forward for future collaboration with you. Lastly, I would like to thank Shamla ma'am and Murthy sir for their constant efforts in the fruition of this session. And I would like to thank all the attendees for their participation and patience. Hope this session proved to be beneficial for you and most of your queries were answered. So with this, I would like to end the session. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. It was pleasure to talk here. And I also would like to thank Murthy sir, Shamla ma'am, Harshal, and yourself for coordinating with me and taking pain even late nights to check the even internet connections and everything. That is very thoughtful, and I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right.